Trolley. Witches, tigers, no, cage tigers, and feeling persecuted. So what's got witches to do with cage tigers and with anything, to be honest? I had this short story that resonated with quite a few people that was called I Feel Like a Caged Tiger. And I will put the description. Great. The link into the description. Brain, hello, wake up. And it was obviously, it's a big metaphor, and it's about something that's wild that has been caged. And so then I did my next drawing. That I have a little reel as well. It's called The Witch's Feast. And the witches actually only appeared, they are flying on their brooms, they appeared in the very end. And somehow the one was leading that feedback and talking about wanting to be a little bit more dangerous or wanting to be a little bit more wild, was leading, I guess, to the witches appearing in my drawing. And you have to look very closely, but there was a very tiny sign that was saying Blocksberg, because in Germany we have actually soon the so-called Walpurgisnacht coming up, and the witches are all flying to Blocksberg. That's a mountain that used to be in still is in East Germany, but it used to be the eastern part, DDR at the time, the Brocken, and there is a lot of, myths, symbolism, and people are doing, I've never been, but it's a thing, I think it's the night to the 1st of May. I hope I'm not completely wrong. Anyway, so so the witches all of a sudden appeared. Then I was thinking, I love that song by the Eagles, Witchy Woman. And then there were certain films. There's one I actually have to watch again, the Witches of Eastwick. That was like a dark, funny horror thing. And then there was one that was a romantic comedy, but also a little bit dark. I loved that one that was with Sandra Bullock. It was called Pure Magic. Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock, and they play these two witchy sisters. And so I've been thinking on this a little bit more, and why is this? Well, it doesn't really matter why it is showing up, but, I have a logo that a wonderful graphic designer did do for me years ago, and guess what it was called? And there's actually a background to this. So when you go to my website, you can see it, But if you look very closely, it's not just Anja Kersten, but it says For a Magic World. And it was based on the following. In 2008, I did this film training in LA, and there was we had different teachers, but there was one that was working a lot with myths and archetypes. And she let us do a quiz that was very extensive. And at the end of it, she told us our 3 archetypes that related to us, who we are as a person. And so she distinguished between one basic one that's always there, then one present one, and then one future one. And so why she was doing this with us was because the idea was, if you were as an actress, for example, having that there was a role coming up that kind of fitted your archetype, then it was like a winning game. I thought it was very intriguing and interesting. So you will understand in a minute how and why this ties back to magic and witches and whatnot. So she told me that my basic one was the magician, and to be specific, Morgana. And she, so she is, because we say magician, and then the female one is witch. And what I also already find actually really interesting, because with the witches, there's, I think, more a feeling of being persecuted, or they were persecuted for sure, the women who were viewed as witches, which is obviously, so there's a real dark component to it. And Morgana archetype, she was portrayed often also as very dark, manipulative, and so on and so forth. I used to read that as a teenager. It was called The Mists of Avalon, was the whole saga around Arthur and the Knight's Table and stuff. And so I think, I don't know, in my awareness, it was like the first take. I think it was also written by a woman, if I'm not completely wrong, or by a couple. But I do remember that Morgana was actually portrayed more positive in that depiction. But so now, if we, and obviously there is, otherwise we wouldn't love things like the Witches' Feast in Blocksberg in Germany, and for Halloween, being a witch or whatever it is, or Bewitched, there was the series Bewitched. So we have a fascination with it, but I think it's not just about, lovely duffly or being cute. I think, and that's where it ties in with the caged tiger. I think where it gets really interesting is that darker part of it, that wild side that somehow was persecuted if it was lived in some, for women maybe the more empowered part, however you want to roll it, but it was like this. If you bring this side of yourself out, there's the fear of being persecuted, well, you know what I mean, or judged, however you want to call it. And I think that's the interesting one. So if it's about uncaging parts of ourselves, or connecting with our inner witch archetype or magician archetype, I don't think it's about casting spells so much, but the magic is actually lies in having the courage to walk into the dark and bring some light to it, and also kind of have fun with it, so I love stories. At the moment, I'm totally hung up on the Broken Wood mysteries. It's like a very quirky New Zealand crime series, and the characters are very delightful and very weird, and the murders are very weird, and you nearly have compassion with the people who are committing the murder. So it's kind of like whoever is writing this, and the cast is brilliant as well, doesn't have fear to go into these darker, edgy places and then bring delight to them. And that's, in my opinion, where the magic lies. So I think if you wanted to connect with the wilder part of yourself, or the witchy part, or both, you could start by asking, what is it I fear expressing, where I feel like if I express this, I will be judged really badly, or it might become very controversial, but you also feel a little bit of a spark of excitement. So it's kind of both. You have the spark of excitement, but it's also really scary, because there's a part of you, maybe the ancient part of ourselves, that feels like, oh, I'll be in the shit if I put that out. So I think that would be a good way of playing with it. And if you're too scared to do this on your own, you always can book a coaching with me. What about that? So that's the thought of today on witches, caged tigers, and feeling, I think it's prosecuted. I'm totally confused now. Anyways, I'm sure you will tell me in the comments, hopefully. That was your creative rebel, Anja. Ciao, ciao.